The Bukey Horde, Napoleonic Ambitions. Three men make up this story. The first terrified half the world. He was referred to as the Antichrist and the monster of Corsica. The second was the Hamlet of Russia, with German blood and the ugliest man in the empire. There was also a third. His fame was not so great, but his fate was not so tragic. And, judging by the plans that were realized, his success was far greater than his counterparts. They sought to use Bukey Khan in their plans. Bukey Khan, in turn, used them, France and Russia, Bonaparte and Paul I. The fates of these three disparate characters were connected in a peculiar way. The first consul of France, the Russian autocrat, and the Qazaq sultan. How can this alliance between the three be explained? He wants to turn Bukey into a reliable ally. Is this a series of coincidences or something more? The Bukey Horde appeared for a reason. And why did the Bukey Khanate become an extension of Bonaparte's plans?
Because the project was always how to hit the British there.
The French campaign, the assassination of the emperor, and the new Khanate, an absolutely incredible and yet absolutely genuine alliance of the three. The Bukey Horde, Napoleonic Ambitions, Reflections on History, our version. Chapter 1. Strategist of the Steppe. Even when breathing, let alone touching, one must be very careful. These folders contain the most valuable eyewitnesses of the era. This is the Astrakhan archive. To handle the documents, I need to put on gloves. Yes, the documents are a little worse for wear. Holding our breath and carefully turning the pages, we step back more than 2 centuries in time. These documents are mainly related to the origins and foundation of the Bukey Horde. This story began in the second half of the 18th century, from the so-called Dust Campaign. The Bukey Horde arose due to a decree that it be established on lands that had been abandoned by the Kalmyks during the Dust Campaign. Following the defeat of Jungaria, the Kalmyks occupying the Volga-Danube interfluve decided to return to their historical homeland, modern Xinjiang. They numbered around 200,000. By the beginning of the 19th century, there remained a huge unpopulated space between the lower reaches of the Volga and the Ural, patrolled on all sides by watchmen where, with the permission of the Tsarist authorities, Kazakhs were allowed to roam. It was necessary to populate the empty space. Vilyal Aspandyarov, the formation of the Bukey Horde and its elimination. And since you need to occupy some territory to form some kind of state, well then, a governing and administrative body should be established. And Bukey, a descendant of Genghis Khan, made a petition. Bukey, the son of the Khan of the younger Zhuzh, Nur Ali, was no longer a young man at that time. He was about 60 years old.
Bukey Khan был дородный человек.
Bukey Khan was a stout man, a big fellow. He always needed help when mounting a horse. But once in the saddle, he could ride all day and never tire. Bukey wanted to claim the throne, but had failed. The Russian administration preferred rulers who were more accommodating and less powerful. And the Sultan was an outstanding politician.
Он был, во-первых, очень дипломатичный, дальновидный.
Firstly, he was very diplomatic, far-sighted, and most importantly, he knew how to find common ground with different people. And therefore, when there was a moment of crisis, the choice fell on Sultan Bukey. And it was not by chance that he was elected chairman of the Khan's council.
ханского совета.
It was essentially a kind of parliament. The Khan's council was created in 1797 to limit the power of the Khan. It was this council that also allowed Bukey to take this very power. Here is an address by the horde's Khans. This document is dated December 30th, 1800. This is a document determining the location and obtaining permission to stay in the territory. Was it just before the formation of the Bukey horde? Yes. But the chairman of the Khan's council had more ambitious plans. Bukey turned to his friend Pavel Popov for help. Popov was the chieftain, the Cossack chieftain of the Astrakhan army. Popov suggested that Bukey establish an independent Khanate in the Rin deserts. Following his advice, Bukey turned to Noring, the governor of Astrakhan, and asked him to petition the Tsar for acceptance into a permanent confederacy with the people under his control, so that they would be allowed to roam between the Volga and the Ural, Bilyal Aspandyarov, the formation of the Bukey horde and its elimination. So, the first step was taken. The petition was submitted for consideration. However, they had little respect for a request from a sultan with such a meager reputation. Napoleon stepped in. Who devised Paul's march on India? How did Consul Bonaparte help Sultan Bukey? Who was the mysterious Sayyid Baba? Chapter 2. An Imperial Project. Shimmering lawns, welcoming alleyways, and classical perfection bathe in the rays of the autumn sun. This is Paris in all its glory. Even a home for the disabled, Les Invalides, is a palace here. However, thousands of tourists are attracted here by something other than the magnificent architecture. It is known that Napoleon died in 1821 on the island of St. Helena. After 19 years, they suddenly remembered that he wanted to be buried on the banks of the Seine. And such a cathedral was founded at Les Invalides. The names of the battles won by the great commander are inscribed in gold around the pedestal. But he lost that battle, says Prince Charles, Napoleon's great nephew. The battle barely got started. According to the prince, this was generally the brainchild of Paul I, and Napoleon took advantage of it.
To use, this old strategic plan of Russia, and to take part, to help the Russian, and then to go and hit the British in India, because the project was always how to hit the British there.
The goal was to defeat the enemy by reaching the jewel of the English crown. It was Napoleon's dream and the beginning of the great game. At that time, Russia and Britain were still allies. They were fighting against France. This was in 1800, when Bukey filed a petition to Paul I. By that time, part of the Russian Empire had been defeated by Napoleon, who then makes an unexpected move. 6,000 prisoners returned to Russia without exchange or other conditions.
He was, in terms of psychology, he was a primary man, so he was attached on his first reaction, on the fact.
Moreover, Bonaparte ordered that the prisoners have a new uniform made for them and have their weapons returned, all at the expense of the French treasury. This courtesy completely captivated Paul. Originally an enemy of France, he now becomes a supporter. By that time, the Russian emperor had become disillusioned with his British allies and had even begun to despise them. Napoleon decided to use Paul I. He understood all the grievances that Paul had built up against Austria and Britain since the time of the Suvorov campaign, and he decided to break this alliance. Napoleon imagined a military alliance that involved deploying French troops to southern Russia where they would unite with the Russian forces, with both armies being led by him through Central Asia to India. Paul was not only minded to attack the British in India, but even rushed ahead of Bonaparte by making the first steps towards the implementation of this program. Yevgeny Tarl, Napoleon. It can be assumed that there was some kind of a conversation between Napoleon and Paul I regarding the campaign to India. But Paul I himself took advantage of this idea. So, whose idea that was, Napoleon or Paul's, and how it came about, is unclear. But only through the alliance of the two emperors did this adventure have a chance of success. In January 1801, an order was received and 22,000 men under the command of Ataman Orlov set out on a journey. The plan was that the French soldiers, together with General Masséna, would meet with the Russian army in Astrakhan. They would then proceed to the Caspian Sea, Iran, and to India through Afghanistan. It was a corps made up of Russian, French, and Kazakh armies, 30,000 French infantry bayonets, 20,000 sabres of the Don Cossacks, a certain number of Ural Cossacks, at least 10,000, and regular Kazakh cavalry. They also planned to recruit cavalry in Afghanistan. In total, the researcher believes, there were about 100,000 warriors, which was a serious endeavor. But allies in the steppe and a strategic base were needed to provide the troops with horses, fodder, and intelligence. It was necessary somehow to advance, move the army, the military equipment. All of this required additional support from the local populations en route to India.
По пути следования огромной армии надо иметь форпосты, укрепления.
One must have outposts, fortifications, and bases for the army as it advances. The army must have regular rest, be supplied with food, and so on, and it would seem that this is one of the reasons for the speedy resolution of the issue.
Быстрого разрешения этого вопроса связано с этим.
The official explanation for the creation of internal autonomy was to disperse the population of the younger Jus, solve the land issue, and at the same time make the transition to a less nomadic lifestyle, which made steppe politics more manageable and predictable. On March 11, 1801, Pavel I signed the fateful document. I gladly accept Bukey Sultan, who presides over the Khan's council. I allow him to roam wherever he wishes, and, as a sign of my favor, I assign him a gold medal with my portrait, which is to be worn around his neck on a black ribbon. As for the Astrakhan army, Commander Popov is awarded the rank of Major General as a reward for his diligence. Paul I. He wants to protect these lands from the invasion of the Kyrgyz Kazakhs. And a second point, he wants to turn Bukey into his reliable ally in the completion of this project. And here is an amazing coincidence. There was another individual in the entourage of the Kazakh Sultan. He was a very mysterious and influential person. Bukey Khan had a certain spiritual mentor, Sayyid Baba, a Nogai person. He even advised Bukey Khan on how he could occupy this territory and relocate there. He was a very interesting character, in my opinion, and one of the key players in this story. He had some knowledge of India, and Bukey Sultan could have had exactly the kind of information that would have been useful to both Napoleon and Paul in achieving their cherished goal. At that time, one of the main problems was that of geography. My maps reach only as far as the routes to Khiva and Amu Darya, Emperor Paul complained. And Sayyid Baba knew exactly how to get to India and what obstacles might be encountered on the way. He traveled a lot and had lived in India for many years. But did Bukey communicate any information received from Sayyid Baba? And did it reach the Russian emperor? And could this information have provoked the idea of an Indian campaign? It is only known that the Astrakhan governor corresponded with the chieftain who led the campaign. As a historian, I haven't seen any documents about Sayyid Baba. So, what role Sayyid Baba played, or could have played, in all of these events is unknown. Within a few hours of the signing of the decree on the formation of a new horde, history would take a new turn. It was necessary to understand that the British were not just sitting idly by with their jaws dropped, so to speak. So he signed a decree on the formation of the inner horde late in the evening, and a few hours later he was killed during a palace coup. Now, if this union of Paul and Napoleon had taken hold, had it not been for the intrigues of the British, then the union of France and Russia, had it continued with its political history, could have prevented many wars in Europe, perhaps even the First World War. When it comes to history, what is done, and there's no going back. Why was Paul I killed? How did the Indian campaign end? And how did Napoleon help Sultan Bukey again? Chapter 3. Fatal Blow. The alliance with Russia collapsed when the conspirators entered the bedroom of Paul I. By poison and with wine befuddled, the secretive assassins huddled, insolent faces over fear-filled hearts, as was written about the killers of Paul I. Moreover, this manuscript of Pushkin depicted the profile of the emperor. The Mikhailovsky Palace, March the 12th, about midnight. There were several of them, intoxicated by champagne. He receives a blow to the temple with a snuff box. Then his courtiers, bought with English money through the efforts of Ambassador Whitworth, strangle him with a scarf. The subjects were told that the emperor had died of a stroke, but few believed it. Even at the time, a joke went round among the people that Paul had died of an apoplectic stroke, caused by a blow to the temple from a snuff box. When the news came to Paris that Paul had been strangled in the Mikhailovsky Palace, Bonaparte was furious. Everything that he had achieved with such skill and such success in relation to Russia was destroyed. The British missed me in Paris on the day the infernal machine exploded, but they did not miss me in St. Petersburg, he shouted. There was no doubt in his mind that the murder of Paul had been organized by the British. Evgeny Tarl, Napoleon. One of the first documents signed by the new emperor, Paul's son, was a decree cancelling the campaign. He gives the order to his troops, his army, and the regular army of the Cossacks to withdraw.